All right. Hi. So I just got out of Transformers the last night. Um, I am presently at a bit of a loss to contextualize what I just saw. So it might help to put it uh, in the frame of reference of the other four Transformers movies. I'll go into my opinions about those pretty quick. I think the first one is fine, probably the best of the four from like a filmmaking storytelling standpoint. I certainly think the effects have aged the best in that movie. Um, it's clear that they really haven't figured out how to stage action in there, but the storyline is basic. It's fine. You're gonna see it four more times before this series is done at the absolute minimum. So um, that's a thing that happened. I seem to remember a person named Megatron being a fairly consistent presence in that movie and something of a threat. We'll get into that later. The Definitely, I think the effects have aged better than now four sequels and counting, but not terribly indelible. I mean, I had to watch it again years after the fact to remember what I had seen in that movie. The second movie, I think, is well, was probably the worst. Certainly the one that makes me the angriest. Um, I think that the cardinal sin of Revenge of the Fallen, and don't get me wrong, there is stuff that I like in that movie. Um, I enjoy the score, obviously. I think the forest fight is great. Jetfire's kind of neat. You still there? Cool. Um, I like the idea of there being Transformers on the planet before the dawn of humanity, and we'll get to that too. Um, but I Revenge of the Fallen is at its core less than a movie, and I understand with the writer's strike going on why that is. But what makes it so insufferable is hoping the either the studios or the directors or Aaron Kruger's decision to counter that with um, just awful directorial excess and annoying racist robots, just pee jokes, fart jokes, college crap, all that horseshit. Um, Up until so probably the worst since then. Still the one I find the most obnoxious. Three is somewhat better. The first act, which features Shia the most, is probably just as bad. Um, I think Revenge of the Fallen probably was Shia LaBeouf's best turn in these movies. And Dark of the Moon, he was just so obnoxious, and I hated him. I really don't have anything to say for or against Megan Fox or Rosie Huntington Whiteley. Um, but whereas Revenge of the Fallen is less than a movie, Dark of the Moon is um, a kind of rom com, situational, can't find a job, Happy Madison production, kind of forcibly sewn onto this heavily flawed but still kind of entertaining uh, conspiracy action epic. Up until the last night, I'd say it was probably the ugliest of the movies. The designs were very insectoid and gray. Again, keep in mind, metallic gray. Mm, I still think that Sentinel Prime and Megatron had very good designs, and I like them both as characters. I think they were both underutilized. Um, Probably the most nihilistic of the movies still, but even though there's stuff that makes me incredibly angry, Shia LaBeouf being an asshole, the treatment they give Soundwave, the treatment they give Shockwave, Megatron, Starscream, uh, just the obvious apathy towards Transformers lore and the ability for Transformers to be characters in their own right, I really don't like, but there are some decent set pieces. It's not horrible gray all the time. Um, if the last hour is on TV, I would watch it. Um, I'm probably gonna get crap for saying this. I think Age of Extinction is probably my favorite of the four. Um, Not necessarily the best in terms of filmmaking, but I feel that tonally, it's a much more consistent movie in that it could be dark and then have a little bit of comedy in it, but revert back to gallows humor just as rapidly. Um, it's still a bad movie, and there are certainly scenes in it that make me furious. I don't particularly like the main three characters in Age of Extinction. Um, I think Mark Wahlberg's a fine actor, and he has potential to be very funny. But he's most funny when he's in a movie like Pain and Gain, also a Michael Bay film, where he's just a sociopath. Um, and what's funny is that he's stupid and self-centered. So I like that, like Boogie Nights or Pain and Gain Mark Wahlberg, where he's such a self-destructive yet oddly naive, dangerous person, and I don't think that necessarily translates well into somebody that we're supposed to root for unequivocally. Um, Nicola Peltz is a goldfish. She's really not in this one except for a phone call for about 20 seconds. Um, Shane, whatever his name is, just slime. You honestly could cut him out, and that movie would be about 20% better. Um, I like the cast of Age of Extinction a lot in terms of the main robots, who are, I believe, all in this again. I like Lockdown a lot. Um, Very clearly, it's an Aaron Kruger script, so there are lots of parts that don't land. There are lots of things that don't add up, but I feel like it was more effective, and there were actually consequences to what was happening, at least some of the time, like Ratchet's death. The idea that humanity, if it messes around in this, is going to go extinct eventually. Again, human extinction as a realistic consequence of what's going on. We'll get to that. And honestly, it didn't make me as angry as Revenge of the Fallen, but I would say that The Last Night, to me at least, is probably what a lot of people felt like after Age of Extinction, which I know was not particularly popular with people who like the first three. Um, for whatever reason, the tone is different, the robots look different. Um, it, but in terms of actual storytelling and directorial style, Last Night is by far the worst of these movies. It's not quite as obnoxious as Revenge of the Fallen, but it is an unending parade of um sorry just incomprehensible scenes on scenes on scenes and character introductions that don't go anywhere, and people showing up again to disappear. Horrible editing in this movie. I could barely tell what was going on most of the time. Everything is shot extremely close up. The storyline, Yet, despite this movie is quantifiably insane. Um, you have the essentially throw Armageddon, the first four Transformers movies. Uh, I maybe some of that Charlie Hunnam King Arthur movie that just came out into a blender, and you've got a pretty succinct condensation of this movie. Um, the architect of this storyline was a name I knew from my kid days because he wrote one of my favorite bad movies of all time, Batman and Robin. Akiva Goldsman worked on this movie, and it shows. This is beyond like Winter's Tale level of insanity. There are things on things on things on things on things happening in this movie, and there's no like even something like Batman and Robin had build up to what was being gone on. This will dump exposition in your lap, first order of the day, and what counts as a plot development is exposition that furthers that. Um, so you'll have, um, and the thing about this movie is that when I say that it is the first four Transformers movies, Armageddon, and a little bit of Legend of the Sword thrown into a blender, I'm not kidding. This is exactly the same plot as Revenge of the Fallen, shot with the cast of Dark of the Moon, of Age of Extinction. This movie is disorienting. It's, I suppose, fairly intense for what it is. I was never excited during this movie. Um, I knew exactly what was going to happen as it was telegraphed to me, essentially. It's with Age of Extinction, there was at least a sense of a good sport to it in that, you know, you had dinosaurs and robots riding on these dinosaurs as they charge into this city, and it's fine with that. With this movie, you like exposition is constantly being thrown at you, but you don't feel that it's going anywhere. Um, it feels like it's there to be there. The plot of this movie, in pretty much the terms that I can say it in, is that well, obviously Transformers have been here forever. Um, not 12 primes, 12 knights um, stole a pair of MacGuffins from Quintessa, who you've seen in the trailers. Um, the Prime of Life, apparently not a Quintesson. Um, no character here. She is there to be there and a villain. And in that she's just there to move the plot along, affects everything that she touches. Optimus Prime has no arc in this movie. Um, he, I guess technically, he has his mind taken over, as you see. It's broken in the. We're getting into spoilers here, but it's broken in exactly the way you're expecting it's going to be broken. He almost suffers consequences for essentially bringing about what had to have killed billions of people in this movie, but that's it. Um, I suppose we'll get to the very end of this movie in a bit, but I suppose it leaves the door open for future sequels. I hope they're not sequels like this. Like I'm just gonna say it right now. Don't go pay money to see this in the theater. Just don't. I know most of you are probably going to do that anyway, but if they're so clearly set on making a Transformers cinematic universe, don't have this be the mold that you want them to follow in. Because this is hackneyed to a point that I would usually find enjoyable in a movie, but it's not fun. Okay, there is one element that's pretty great in this movie. Cogman rocks. Um, I don't know who voices him, but he is just having a ball. He switches back and forth between this dry, drawl delivery of these great lines, um, to just this kind of insane Michael Bay-ish, angry, I'm going to leap at the screen and we'll show off the visual effects sort of guy. But um, one thing that really bugged me, they mention he's a headmaster. He doesn't turn into anything. He never transforms throughout this movie. Um, he they get into a car at one point in this movie, and Anthony Hopkins makes a cryptic comment about um, this car. This vehicle is abandoned and never seen again. Cogman does not turn into a head at any point. And I'm wondering if some executive cut that out because it was too stupid, and if that is indeed the case. Did you see this movie? Uh, Headmaster being accurate to the lore would be would be by miles the smartest thing about this movie. Um, but he's fun. Like he's human sized and human shaped, and you can fit him in a lot of positions where you really, I guess, still can't, or Michael Bay is still not willing to put Transformers in. So they could go into this automated World War II sub, which they do. Um, and he can still be in there. Bumblebee has to hang out on the outside, and um, as they go down to this alien ship at the bottom of the sea. But Cogman can be in there. He can apparently pull vegetables and all the ingredients to make a meal out of his ass. He just pulls fish out of the ocean somehow without crumpling the submarine up like a tin can. Um, there's a of all the Transformers movies, this one is undoubtedly the worst when it comes to science. Um, but he, what's going on essentially is that these knights have stolen the staff from Quintessa, so that Cybertron, which is that's not Unicron in that you've seen in the trailers. That's actually Cybertron that's been spaghettified. Um, cannot be brought back to life because at the center of the Earth is Unicron, which I know is very interesting, right? The reason that you know he's Unicron is because in literally Quintessa's first or second scene with no build-up whatsoever, she just says, "Oh yeah, Unicron is in the center of the Earth." They never explain what Unicron is in relation to Cybertron in any meaningful way. Uh, they hint that Primus is a thing, but it's just like, oh yeah, Unicron's at the center of Earth. Go kill him. He has to die for Cybertron to be brought back and to save everybody. But there's no exploration of lore. There's not really an attempt to make it into an arc for Optimus that he thinks this is redemption. Or Nemesis, sorry. He actually is Nemesis Prime in this. She gives him the hate plague, or what have you. Megatron has that symbol on his face. No explanation whatsoever why he has that on his face, because he and Quintessa only meet in the last act, and he has it well before this. Megatron sucks in this movie. He literally is just sitting around in a car getting info from Barricade. Barricade's in this movie. He's fine. He doesn't really have a character. Unfortunately for us, most of the rest of the Decepticons do, and they are awful. Like, it's like the two in particular who are the worst are Mohawk and Nitro Zeus. Sorry. Shockwave Light, who have just these stupid gangster designs and like these Reno Wilson as Brains kind of voices. Do you want to know what Shockwave looks like with a chain? No? Well, you're going to find out. And he's just talking about kicking ass while in jail. They're really stupid. Luckily, most of them don't last that long. but some of the worst Decepticons ever, and they're barely in it. Most of them do die fairly quickly. Barricade, I did not see it was one of them, which is fine because he doesn't embarrass himself in this movie. I love Barricade's design. The Megatron's got a great design. He does jack all with it. Um, but one of the weird things about the Decepticons in this movie is that they're introduced in like a putting the gang together style fashion, which is completely at odds with what's going on. That scene where you see Megatron meeting Lennox in the desert happens in this movie. And they have a montage of these weird, annoying Decepticons who most of whom are going to die. I don't know. It's not entertaining, though. It's not a fun watch. Sorry. But so the reason that Megatron is essentially being dispatched by the TRF, the Transformer Response Force, which is all the governments coming together to outlaw all Transformers, to essentially help them stop Quintessa from bringing Cybertron to Earth and destroying Unicron and Earth by extension, to reanimate Cybertron. And with no explanation as to why he's there, one of the Knights of Iacon or Terminus or this movie kills all the momentum from the end of Age of Extinction. For sure. Like, I guess Optimus froze around Jupiter, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because he just zooms into space at the end of this, and he literally is transmitting his message frozen into a rock as he floats through space and somehow makes it all the way to Cybertron completely frozen. He's like, "What has happened to my world?" Which is kind of funny considering that it looks drastically better than it did at the end of Dark of the Moon. But so Cybertron is coming to Earth, apparently not throwing the entire solar system out of whack by doing it, and somehow not causing the end of the world when it smashes into the planet. So you get the military, you get the Autobots, you get the Knights, which become good guys essentially, all teaming up with Optimus, who's brought back when Bumblebee finds his voice. There's one scene that builds up to it, and it's a comic relief scene, so there's no explanation as to why he gets his voice back. I thought he got his voice back at the end of the first movie. Why is it so hard to remember that? But it's and of course you've got your grand conspiracy. Anthony Hopkins is the last of the Witwickies. Merlin was the first. This is an Akiva Goldsman story because the tapestry that's woven is insane, but it's also ridiculously involved. It's like if you copy pasted that scene from Revenge of the Fallen where Jetfire is essentially info dumping what the Matrix is and who the Primes were. If you redid that scene over and over again in a plethora of different styles for 2.5 hours, you would essentially have Transformers The Last Knight. I'm trying to think. There's not a ton of meaningful death in this. Canopy dies, as you saw. Elizabeth and Isabella and Squeaks are barely in this movie. This movie actually has so many characters that it brings in, and so many characters it's trying to bring back, that it loses track of who is supposed to be where. Their enemy ships will show up at one point. that are clearly from the Autobot ship, but they're apparently being flown by bad guys. Like they've got the same designs as the ones from Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction, but they're opening fire on the military. The military's in this. Ward Shower comes back again. Lennox is back as essentially part of Discount Cemetery Wind. They totally recycle that. I think Tyrese shows up at one point in the very end of the movie, and it reeks of we had to get him in here for a couple days in the end, and we didn't have him throughout the entire movie. It might not have even been him. He had a goatee on, but it sounded like it. And the romantic lead at least kind of does something in this movie because she is the last Wiki aside from Anthony Hopkins, who is now obviously too old to do anything, except that he does everything in this movie. And she, as the last descendant of Merlin, her lineage's DNA, I'm not making this up, her lineage's DNA was encoded into a staff given to him by the 12 Knights who stole it from Quintessa, and she is the only one who can prevent Cybertron from being reanimated at Earth's expense. So, in addition to that, there's a magical talisman on legs that Mark Wahlberg gets in the opening of this movie that doesn't, I can't think really does all that much. The staff is the main MacGuffin, and apparently the talisman will lead you to the staff, and so she's the only one who can control the staff, and he has this weird-legged, bulletproof chastity belt thing constantly scurrying around his body, which sounds probably cooler than it actually is. Scrapper shows up in the junkyard in this movie and doesn't do anything. He just transforms from a backhoe and he's gone in the next scene. I'd be interested to see what was cut from this movie and what was added in by studio request. I respect all the writers who worked on this thing. Akiva Goldsman is usually, if he's bad, he's entertainingly bad, and if he's not, he's actually a talented scriptwriter. He did this movie called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, which I actually really like. Markham and Holloway wrote, I don't remember their names, but they wrote Iron Man. So you have the guy who wrote Batman and Robin of Winter's Tale having the people who wrote Iron Man write a movie at the behest of the man who made Armageddon and the Transformers movies, and it's as insane as you would expect, but it's not really fun. Like I said, the new robots, unfortunately, are more annoying or underdeveloped. Thankfully, the Age of Extinction cast is still in this movie. They have some cool character moments, like when Hound helps bounce a signal around the globe so that Mark Wahlberg can call his daughter. They don't really do a ton. It's nice to see that they're all pretty much okay at the end of this movie, because I honestly like them a lot from Age of Extinction and even this movie. Steve Buscemi shows up. He doesn't really do anything. But the climax of this movie is them taking the night ship from the last movie and a different ship from the bottom of the ocean, which Vivian can control, and they bring it up to above Stonehenge, which apparently has existed since the times of Pangea. Yeah. And sticking the staff through into the heart of Unicron to suck the energy from him, which will destroy the Earth. by cooling the core and removing the magnetic field, because that's a thing, and bringing Cybertron in close for that, and then um God, you have the military just shows up out of nowhere. So it's the end of it's Revenge of the Fallen taking place on Stonehenge. One thing I guess I'll give this movie a little bit of credit for, they're a little bit more creative with the final set piece in this, because this ship, like everybody, Optimus and Bumblebee and the major humans coalesce on this ship at the bottom of the ocean. It rises up as Cybertron is coming down on the Earth. Um, but it's all very gray. Like I wish there was more color in it, because like, and there's a huge amount going on. It's just not um, I, it's just not fun to look at because it's so gray and it's a lot of things coming down as they're coming up, which has some really cool potential, especially when it's rising up through the ocean and they're getting knocked around on the top of this thing as they fight. Um, there's really not very much good Transformers action in this movie. I can't think of like something Forest Fight worthy, or Optimus and Dark of the Moon worthy, or Dinobots Charge worthy, or um, nothing really compares. And it's mostly, again, focused on the humans. I don't want a Transformers movie focused on the humans. I want a Transformers movie about Transformers. Um, okay, but it's very. Cogman's in there. He's fun, like I said. Bumblebee is kind of in there. Like after you've taken Sam out of the picture, and apparently Sam is dead. Like Vivian, like Laura Haddock's character Vivian and Anthony Hopkins are the only Wiccans left alive. Um, I did say Wiccans because that's the original. That's what the original name of these people were, apparently. No explanation as all as to how that connects to Archibald and what he was doing in the Arctic and whether or not that was an accident. Literally everybody in human history ever who has made a significant contribution um, is part of the Witwicky family. That's the thing that happened. Um, and they're, but apparently Sam and his parents are no longer alive for whatever reason. Um, Transformers just keep coming and coming and coming, and so that's the reason so much of the city is in ruins. And they, the, there's a kind of a global coalition put together who aren't entirely bad guys, but are still antagonists. Lennox is part of them. He's kind of a mediator between the Transformers and the other elements of this TRF. So it's essentially just Cemetery Wind. If Cemetery Wind weren't complete bungholes. Um, when we meet the young girl, Isabella Moner, she's living in this war zone with Squeaks and Canopy, the guy under the rock. Um, Everything that you've seen in that trailer is pretty much the first 15 minutes of this movie. Bumblebee putting himself back together. Again, never explained how he can do that. And it really just sucks any tension that you might have out of the fight with Optimus later. Because you actually see himself put himself back together after that point. And you don't know why he can do that. Like, you see that hammer that he's fighting with in the trailers, and that's not the forge of Solus Prime or anything. It is just him pulling himself back together for no adequately explained reason. But Mark Wahlberg is wanted. He's hiding in the Badlands in South Dakota. Honestly, the of the comic relief in this movie, the Indian chief in the beginning of this movie is not that bad. But they live in a war zone for some reason instead of Energon detectives are so inconsistent in these movies that you'd think that you could just not live in a war zone that is constantly being monitored. I don't know where you would find food for that, and it really bites him in the ass. Canopy gets hit and he dies. Um, he really doesn't have much of a character. The acting, the child acting in this movie is not terrible. Um, I wouldn't honestly say that any of the acting in this movie is particularly awful. Um, it's certainly not a good script, especially from the Transformers. Uh, but the bigger Transformers, the secondary Autobots like Crosshairs and Drift and Cogman, obviously, Hound, all have great lines. And it that is probably the part of the movie that could be considered the most fun. Is just watching them kind of interact off each other. But as much as I want to see that happen in a Transformers movie, they also need to be central characters. Optimus Prime, it's like, mm, I, I know I've said it before, but I'm going to reiterate it. I don't want more of these movies. I'm glad that Michael Bay is leaving. I This doesn't seem like something that somebody who is happy with what they're doing have would be making for all these years. But he's anything that could have been salvageable from the better half of this writers team, and it's not Akiva Goldsman, I'll tell you that, is lost in the apathy that he has toward this movie. So not on a spectacle scale. Like this movie has by far the biggest climax of any of the four, because I really don't know how you could top this, and that's unfortunately not the way that Michael Bay should top himself. It's another Transformers movie where everything is fine at the end of the day, and there is one element which I'll get to, which is now drastically different. But you've seen this movie before. You've seen this movie now 5 times in a row. I'm trying to think if there are any ancillary thoughts that I have on it. If you really want to see this movie, um, wait until it comes out on DVD or instant video or something. Don't go see this in the theater. Don't let this turn you off of the Bumblebee movie necessarily, because the director for that movie is Travis Knight, who did Kubo and the Two Strings. I'm genuinely excited to see how that turns out. But this, it's not, it's an insane movie. It's over the top, it's gratuitous, but it's not fun. I didn't enjoy this movie. I The parts that would make me laugh in something like Age of Extinction, which knew that it was dumb, just had me going like, really? Like we're going to do this now? You don't need all these stupid sex jokes with these horny old parodies of English women lying around, or this apparently professor at Oxford who gives essentially the speech that I would give if I were like a tour guide in a museum that had Transformers paintings in it. That it's okay. Oh, the score to this is it's okay. There are a lot of points where they actually just reuse. I think they reuse part of There Is No Plan. The opening of Half Eighth Prime is used verbatim when you meet the baby Dinobots up in South Dakota. It's not quite as Man of Steel as I was fearing that it was, but it's probably the least complex of the scores to date, with one exception. Um, the ending mix of the no sacrifice, no victory theme is amazing. I cannot wait for that. No arrival to Earth, weirdly enough, if there was, I missed it. We got a lot of other themes. You get the You're a Soldier Now Part Two theme when Optimus comes in, but it's actually when Bumblebee comes in. You hear, I think it's a Scorponok theme when Optimus drives triumphantly out of the rubble at the end, because of course he does. And um, There Is No Plan pops up at one point. I think I heard Transformium. Can't talk. I think I heard Transformium at another point. So I don't know if the budget was slashed or something. It's not quite as complex as the other ones, but it's okay. It's not like do 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 at the end of hacking the drone at Age of Extinction level of corny. Um, there's really no featured song. The song is like Wonder Woman. The song is at the end of this movie. It doesn't show up anywhere else. So there's no interpolation of the the Torches song at the end of this movie into the score or anything. Or if there was, I did not pick up on it. But yeah, I think that's all I got. Um, Anthony Hopkins is fine in this movie. He's probably having a good time. I I love Anthony Hopkins from the bottom of my heart, but this is not his most flattering performance ever. This was Anthony Hopkins needs to keep the rent up on his summer home kind of performance. Um, but I don't know. There is one scene when they're just causing massive loss of human life when they're speeding through London, and like Cogman is shooting missiles at his face, and Anthony Hopkins is just like a kid in the passenger seat going whee and flipping off police cars. That's honestly kind of fun. But those two I guess are okay. Cogman is the better half. Simmons is in this movie barely. He's stuck in what Michael Bay thinks Cuba looks like. Um, and it's his job to essentially plot out exactly as it's happening on screen what's going to happen next in the movie. It's ridiculous. And then he goes and plays beach volleyball with Topspin. I'm not making this up. But other than that, it is a condensation of the most gratuitous, insane marginalization of actual Transformers, like characters that you really don't. Hot Rod, Quintessa don't have any character whatsoever. Megatron is minimized. It's not fun. I've said that ad nauseum now, but it's not a movie that I want to continue to keep seeing. I'm sure if you enjoy these things ironically, this movie will have you cackling your ass off. But it's not. Age of Extinction I enjoyed at least in part ironically because it knew. I feel like it knew when it was being stupid. This movie kind of does, but it rubs your face in it, and that it's being stupid and it's doing these dumb things, and it thinks it's. This movie thinks it's being smart at times. The dialogue that they're having back and forth, and they're making quips, and it's just being kind of insufferable. And yeah, I would think that this probably is not going to dissuade many of you from seeing this movie, but I honestly wouldn't. It's not. I don't know. I can't get mad at anybody who likes this movie. You're definitely entitled to what you like, but it's so. Even if it is crazy, it's so recycled and it's so autopilot, and it's not something that I enjoyed. That I really just can't recommend this movie. Um, okay, so having talked for 45 minutes on end now, I'm probably gonna stop it. And see you later. I hope I didn't alienate or offend too many of you. And if you enjoyed this movie, I am really happy for you because you've definitely found something more of something in it than I did. Have a good rest of the night.